Hey, good evening, folks. We're going to get this going if you don't mind. Thank you all for coming out. I know the weather is miserable today, so really appreciate that. These things are pretty important, so thanks a lot for coming out. I'm going to just quickly go over a couple of logistics, then have an opening, and I'm going to throw it over to Matt Brown. So restrooms for logistics are downstairs. I think you all know that. There's only one point of egress, and that's out the back. All right, so don't try to dig out this way should there be an emergency, because it could get ugly. The discussion time is approximately 6 to 8. You know, we're not going to cut anybody off at 8 o'clock, but we're trying to keep it to that because we want a little bit of during the refreshment time, we want people to be able to mingle a bit more casually than getting up and asking a question. So I'm going to ask that we all, if you put your name in, we keep it to one question, one comment. Certainly we want an organic conversation to come from that, but we want everybody to get a chance. And I feel like more people will fill in as the workday ends, but if not, it looks like we've got a crowd where we can probably get everybody in if we just are respectful to everybody else's time, and we want Matt to be able to give a full substantive answer. So if we can just...
If you get a short amount of people talking, can we have seconds? No.
It's always that guy. Always that guy.
It's always that guy.
Names will be chosen at random for those of you who have signed up. And once we've gone through all of that, organically, Matt can sort of direct that conversation and get a conversation going if everybody needs more time. And again, if you feel like you have a follow-up, if you feel like you didn't get your question answered, there's coffee afterwards, and we can all get some one-on-one time then, and maybe follow up then if you feel like you didn't get a full time permission tonight. All right. I'll end that before I give my little opening spiel. I'll end it with, as the host community, we want to just treat everybody with respect, right? I think you can get, you get a better response with respect, and we have a reputation of being kind and respectful out here, and I just want to keep it that way tonight. Let's show our guests how kind we can be, all right, without being walked all over. All right, we're not inviting candidates here to just talk about the power plant. Of course, we're inviting them here for anything. But Matt might focus a bit on environmental issues tonight because that's our biggest local issue. So if you'll permit me, and I apologize for reading my notes for this, but I'm going to just give this quick opening, and then we'll throw it over to Matt. We are pleased to welcome him and his team here tonight. His visit, or the visit of any official running for the highest offices in our state, hopefully reminds you all that the battle we are in right now, and that we've been in for years, is not contained to a small town in northwest Rhode Island. As a matter of fact, out of 39 Rhode Island cities and towns, 32 of them have already passed resolutions opposing this power plant and the loss of local control that Chicago billionaires and Venergy want to destroy our land and lungs over. And let's not forget the neighboring cities and towns in Massachusetts and Connecticut have also passed resolutions in opposition. Our current leadership made a huge mistake inviting this this polluting monster in to level our pristine forests in the name of the almighty dollar. They made a huge mistake compromising their morals for wealth over health. They made a huge mistake trying to convince themselves and others that losing hundreds of acres of land and generations of people's homes can be mitigated, just so that they can sleep at night and unburden themselves from guilt. But their politically fatal mistake has come by awakening a sleeping giant. We in Northern Rhode Island will no longer hire leaders to represent us that actually ignore us. We will no longer sit on the sidelines while candidates tout saving the oceans but omit saving our forests, which, by the way, our southern neighbors agree with, as evidenced by their resolutions opposing this disaster. We are wide awake now, and we are fully caffeinated, and the road to the State House drives through Burrillville. And just in case folks with nicknames like Old Buildings and Trades Governor or Seldom Seen Sheldon don't believe that to be true, perhaps it's because they don't know our little nickname, which is the new kids on the voting block. We don't mind being David in this story. We have just the right mix of faith and confidence, and the perfect stone for this Goliath. And yes, that is an army you see behind us. Prove to us you hear us. Prove to us you are listening, or step aside. We're inviting candidates to come here to not just, as I said, to solely chat about this power plant. Although it is our biggest local battle, it is the stick that poked us awake. We are inviting them here to interview them for running for our state. And another side effect of being awake is that we are not singularly focused, and we are paying close attention to everything. We will know who our next leaders are, and we will never be surprise slapped again. It just so happens Mr. Brown wants to talk to us directly about saving Rhode Island from this extremely damaging and antiquated idea for generating power. So, without me taking up any more of his time, I'd like to invite former Secretary of State and newly announced Democratic candidate for governor, Matt Brown, to let us know why he thinks this is good.
Steve, do you need me to stand right here, or can I
No,
move
you can
around?
move around. I'll just follow you.
All right. I see that camera there.
Yeah, I do that.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for coming out, and thank you for, I see a whole number of people here that I've learned a lot from already over recent weeks and spent a lot of time with, and I appreciate it so much. I met here tonight Ken Putnam. I'm just hoping that you do not run for governor. Because, I made an announcement today, and I don't have to retract it, but it is great to be here. Mostly, so I was going to talk mostly about the plant, but then let's talk about anything after that, okay? Absolutely anything at all, and any questions you have or thoughts you have. So first of all, I want to thank all of you, because you have been doing this fight here, leading this fight for almost 3 years. And not just all the people of Burrillville, but all the people of this state, and not just this state, but the whole region, owe you a debt of gratitude. All of us. That's my son back there, Walker. Can you raise your hand there? He was here when we first toured the forest, and so he knows a lot about this issue. But his generation owes you all a debt of gratitude. You are fighting not just for yourself, but for the state, for the region, and for generations to come. That's what's at stake here. And so I wanted to come and tell you that I'm going to do everything I can to help you and support you to make sure this plant is never built. And today I announced I'm running for governor to fight exactly these kinds of fights. Of all the crazy and backward things that are being done in our state right now, building a fracked gas plant in the middle of a forest in 2018 is the craziest and backwardest of all. It is really completely beyond the pale. And we all know the reasons why it's a crazy and backward idea. The backers of this plant say that the power is needed, but that's not true. It's not. The backers of this plant say that it is clean energy, but it's not. It's polluting, hazardous, toxic energy. It will make it impossible for the state to meet even its very timid carbon reduction goals. So it is not clean energy. It is very dirty energy. The backers of this plant say that it is a short-term bridge, but it's not. It will last for 30 or 40 years. If this plant is built, it will lock Rhode Island into a fossil fuel energy economy for another generation at least. The backers of this plant never talk about the fact that it would require clear cutting over 100 acres of a pristine forest in this state to do it. So the question is, given all of these facts, these are not opinions, these are facts. Given all of these facts, why is it that our state and its leaders threw the doors wide open to this Invenergy Corporation to come here and do this to our state? And I think it goes to a deeper problem, which we'll talk more about, which is the extreme power of corporations in our political system at the expense of people and everyone else. And it's not a coincidence when you think about that they're talking about building the plant here in the corner of the state in a rural community. I think they thought, as you alluded to, I think they thought that people here would just take it. That people here weren't maybe connected enough, or didn't have enough money, didn't have enough power in the political system, and you just roll over and take it. And the fact is, they were wrong, and that's why we're standing here today. So by the way, I would add that, it's similar to what's going on in Providence with the LNG facility. I think that, there's not a coincidence that they're putting that in South Providence, where they thought the people there would just have to take it, and they're not taking it either. And so there's a bigger issue at stake here, which I think we will talk about in the conversation, about who our government is working for, and the fact that government for a long time has been looking out for big corporations and not for people, and that needs to change. So what do we do in the face of that kind of power, corporate power, government power that is not looking out for the people? Well, I don't have to tell you all this is what you've been doing for the last 3 years. I would I guess reinforce what you've been doing and say 3 things. I think we need to tell the truth relentlessly, as you have been doing, and not let any truth go unchallenged. So you may have seen, I wrote an op-ed opposing the plant in the Providence Journal a week or so ago. The editorial page responded with all the arguments I just gave you, that the power is needed, it's clean energy, it's a bridge, and so on. We're going to have a very powerful response coming out to that within days from a very credible expert who's going to pick all those arguments apart and shred them. And so we've got to go against every untruth that is put out there and not let any of them stand. Secondly, this has to be a statewide fight, and you all have done amazing work in getting those resolutions. That's incredible work. It takes a huge amount of effort and organizing, but we've got to do even more. I love coming up here and you start to see the big yellow signs. You see them on the shirts too. There we go. I'd love to see those yellow no power plant signs all over the state. All over the state, because this is an issue that's going to affect the whole state and beyond. And so I'd love to drive into every city and town and see those big yellow signs on the side of the road the way you do here. So the third thing is that we have to show an alternative. And that's part of what I've been focused on is putting out this plan that some of you may have seen that says don't build this power plant and keep us locked into the 19th century energy system. We've got to move into the future. And so I've proposed that we make Rhode Island the first state in the country that produces all of its energy from clean, renewable resources: wind, water, sun, all of it. And that we do it by 2035. And not only that, because of the wind especially, when you add the wind coming off the coast to the sun, there are enough renewable resources in Rhode Island to produce not just all the energy we use, but twice that amount. So we could be the first state in the country to export renewable energy as a source of revenue. This would be the first real industry we've had since manufacturing left 70 years ago. And this will last for as long as we can foresee. This is going to be the energy system. And we're talking about 10,000 jobs. 10,000 jobs projected to create that kind of energy system. And then the last part of this idea is that the people of the state, every resident of the state, should get a share of the profits. This is what they do in Alaska. In Alaska, they rent the oil fields, and with that, to the oil companies to drill. With that rent, the state writes every single person in Alaska a check every year. And we should do that with our wind energy system as we build it. Everybody should get a little bit of should get a share of the profits, because no corporation or bank should own the sun, the wind, and the water. It doesn't belong to them. These are our natural resources, and we should all get a share of the profits of this energy system. So we've got to show an alternative. And that's one of the things. That's one of the things that I've been doing. So, like I said, we can talk about all kinds of things here, but I do want to say that even before we win this election, even over the next several months while we're campaigning, I want to use the campaign to help you in whatever way we can to win this fight. Campaigns do, for whatever reasons, they do draw attention. They do draw some media. They do draw some interest, and so I want to use the campaign, however is helpful for you all, to fight the power plant. And then certainly, after November, we can shut this down. And so I want to thank you all for what you have done. I know that at some level you must be exhausted, because you've been fighting this fight a long time, and for a long time you were largely alone. You've really built something here, but you are still the leaders. And leading is exhausting, and holding a coalition together is hard, and building a movement is hard. And so what I want to say to close is you got to find hope. You got to keep finding hope. Yeah, even against the setbacks, as I know you have. And as you know, nobody gives you hope. You got to go find it. And sometimes you lose it, and you got to go find it again. And people find it in different ways. You find it from each other. You find it from taking a walk in the forest. You find it from some victories. You even find it in setbacks, and you realize you're not giving up, and that gives you hope. But you got to find hope. That's the sword and the shield to win this fight. So find it and hold it, and I'm with you 100% and all the way. And thank you for coming out tonight. So questions about anything, the power plant or anything else?
I had
Yeah.
some folks
Oh,
put
I'm
their,
sorry,
no,
you're
that's
the
all right.
boss,
I
yeah.
just had some, say that again a little louder.
You're the boss.
I had some, you drop your names in if you're interested in talking. I know a few people have arrived a little bit later, so if you're interested, just go write your name down there and we'll grab them. But just to get everybody that signed up a chance first, and then we'll go from there. And I randomly put these in order and yes, Mike?
I just wanted to point out, I know there's some council members that showed up, and there is a meeting at 7, so
Oh, absolutely. We do have a couple of town council members.
they wanted to speak.
Thanks, Mike. Next question. Wow. Councilman Scott or Councilman Trank, if you'd like to start with your question, that'd be great. These are a couple of town councilmen.
All right.
We have a town council meeting to go to, but
Sorry. No.
Ray Trang, Borough Town, thank you.
Thank you so much for all your work. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
I'm just.
Yeah, other side of the, we're on opposite sides of the political spectrum, but yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
But good luck and thanks for the help, we really appreciate it.
All right.
There's no sides on this other than no
Absolutely.
power
There's
plant.
the human side, right?
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman.
I thought you were independent. I was saying I think it's independent. I'm an independent, so. I ended up getting because some person resigned. So there was 3 people, seats open, and in 2016 I went in, and ended up with 2,054 votes. So when Michelle resigned, I ended up being the top vote getter, and I'm in. So now, in June, if I decide to go again, I will. But I was sitting there thinking, oh man, independent, this guy shouldn't do it. But then, and I don't care about, I'm never party politics, I don't care. Best man, best woman for the job. And to be honest, just you coming here is amazing because I don't know how many other towns are doing this where we really are interviewing the governor.
That's it.
And I love it, and it's the best idea. And if other towns did this too, I just think every town should do this because Patricia came, I love her, sweet lady, and you get to hear a little bit about every single person. And I think, what was it? What did you say, Flanders or something? Is that his name?
Bob Flanders.
He's coming. But I think he's put a lot of money into Gina and a lot of stuff. And so we do research. Like, we're constantly looking to see where the money's going, the paper trails, and who's doing what. And it's more than just Burrillville that's affected by the power plant. And these people are here for the power plant, but they're also here for the state. You know?
Absolutely.
We're screaming, like you said, boom, 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 Paul Revere into everywhere, We were all panicking. Last night we had a big meeting, and we couldn't all go down to Fall River. We got one guy go to Fall River. We're panicking at all times. We're trying to raise the flag and set the alarm. So God bless.
Anything I can do to help.
No, God bless. It's great that you're here, and I appreciate it. And
Thank you.
I applaud it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman. Appreciate that. Doug Jobling actually is the first name that came up. So Doug, if you want to stand up and.
Like everyone else said, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
No? I want to first congratulate you on the idea that you just described with the wind energy and pay back to the people. It's innovative and it makes so much sense, and it's absolutely vital for the environment and all the problems we have now with global warming. I want to ask you to consider a variation on the theme. My sense from looking at Deepwater and all the wind, offshore wind, it takes a long time to get those in place and get the approvals and everything else. Solar is something you can do virtually immediately. And it's a matter of financing and figuring out how to pay for a massive investment in solar. And what I want to suggest you consider, every election, every state election, we have bond issue referenda for There's always one for higher education, one for transportation, one for open space, sometimes others. I suggest we have a bond issue for investment in solar energy to subsidize solar rooftop installations all over the state. We don't want to clear cut any forest to put in, gigantic solar arrays, but there's enough roof acreage in this state, and I know not everybody can afford it, but if we did a bond issue, you spread that cost over time, and we could have a very quick and a very large investment in solar energy.
Thank you very much. Is this on? Sort of? Yes, okay. Can people hear me like this? No, okay. Was that a yes or a no? Or in between? In between. All right, I'll do this then. So excellent point. Couple of thoughts. One is, my plan is not just wind. The plan is wind and solar, largely. It's about 60% wind, 40% solar. And I totally agree with you. We need a comprehensive plan on solar. And you see these problems popping up around the state. We need a plan of where all this solar power is going to be created. And we need to start with rooftops, brownfields, et cetera. So absolutely agree with you on that. The question of financing. So this gets to a second idea that I've been talking a little bit about. We're told by our government that there's not enough money for anything, right? So, I don't know if you saw, but it came out today that Rhode Island is one of the worst states in the country in terms of unaffordable housing. We got, I think about 1,000 children who've been made homeless because of how unaffordable the housing has become. People are really struggling with that, but we're told, there's not enough money. We've got school buildings literally falling apart. We've got hospitals that are bankrupt and closing or trying to sell themselves to out-of-state corporations. And there's a lot of stuff breaking here in this state. And this is the United States of America. It's crazy that school buildings are falling down in the United States of America. And we're told by our government that there's only two solutions: raise property taxes, which has gone on for a long time here and has hit the middle class really hard, or go further into debt, which is bonds. Sometimes you have to do that, but debt's not free. We pay interest on that, right? So there's actually another solution to the idea that there's not enough money. About 100 years ago, the state of North Dakota, small state, mostly a farming state back then, in an era very much like ours, where they called it the Gilded Age. And I'd say we're living in the second Gilded Age, where the money has really been totally consolidated and concentrated with big banks and big corporations. And the farmers couldn't get any credit because the big banks didn't want to lend to them. So North Dakota did something innovative. They took all their money out of the big banks. They started their own state investment bank. They put it in there with a mandate and a charter to invest only in the state. Now, since the Wall Street banks collapsed in 2007, 2008, a lot of states are looking at this now. And I think Rhode Island should do this. So the way it would work is that our state now takes about $2.5 billion of taxpayers' money every year and deposits it in Wall Street banks. Those banks take our money and they invest it all over the world. And they make the profit. And they keep the profit. And we pay fees for the favor, right, to the banks. Where do they not invest one of those dollars of our $2.5 billion? Rhode Island. They invest it in Asia, the Middle East, everywhere. But they don't invest our own money back here in our own state. So I'm proposing we do like North Dakota does, like New Jersey's looking at, like a lot of states are looking at now, which is we bring that $2.5 billion home, we put it in our own state bank that has a mandate and a charter to invest only in Rhode Island. And it could invest in solar, could invest in wind, could invest in small business, which is where we need the help, right? Because look at what's happened in our society. It's not that there's not enough money. This is the richest country in the world. There's plenty of money in our society. The problem is that for a long time, it's all gone to big corporations, big banks, and the very wealthiest few, and that's left not enough for everybody else. Okay, so we need to bring some of that money home. We need to get some of that money and opportunity back into communities and back in people's hands. And so this idea is one way we could invest in solar without going further into debt.
Can I ask
Yeah.
a follow-up? I wanted to make sure. I'm just curious your thoughts in the current pro-corporate environment we have in Washington, do you expect there would be any regulatory difficulties with that?
Well, no, North Dakota's been doing it for 100 years, no problem at all. You set it up, it's not run by politicians. They're not making the decisions the way it works now with like the Commerce Corporation, politicians and bureaucrats deciding to give $350 million in corporate giveaways. It's not politicians doing it, it's it's financial managers, professional, just like they do in North Dakota. Independently audited, regulated, and all of that. Look, in North Dakota, in the Depression and the Great Recession, they did okay because they had their own bank when everyone else lost their money. In fact, during the Great Recession, the North Dakota Bank went from about $2.5 billion in assets to $7.5 billion in assets throughout the recession. So this would be a safe place to put our money to invest, and with the profits that we make, we have a new source of revenue to continue to invest in Rhode Island without higher property taxes and more debt, which are the only options that we've been given for a long time.
Great.
Other questions? Oh, sorry.
Absolutely. That's all right. We're going to have Ken Putnam, and then right after Ken is Bob Woods.
Me first?
Yes, sir.
Oh,
You
sure.
go, Ken.
Man, I talked to you earlier.
I remember.
What I would like to suggest to you and tell you also about is, you don't see too many people.
We can't hear you better.
You don't see too, can you hear me now? You don't see too many people here. And most towns are that way. However, if you stop and think, there's a lot of poor people, especially up here in Burrillville. We're not a rich place up here. People are home, working 2 jobs, going home and taking care of their families. The suggestion I'd like to propose to you is, you've heard that we have won 32 towns. That would be wonderful if you tried to get in there and talk to them folks also. Because here's what's going to happen, Matt. If everybody in this room likes you, what do you think we're going to do? We're going to talk to them people that didn't come here tonight. And that's something that could help you along in your matter, right? This Invenergy up here is just totally no common sense whatsoever. With the Situate Reservoir right there, and like I mentioned to you, the air pollution, snow, rain, that pollution goes down into the water and pollutes the land and the water source that we have. We've got to stop that somehow or other. We've really got to stop that. So whatever you do, when you go around, there's 32 towns that said they're against it. That'd be a great thing for you to yell and scream about until you get in position. All right? Thank you, sir.
I will. I'm going to yell and scream as loud as I can, for sure.
That's common sense. You know?
Yeah. No, but that's true. And this, I mean, my campaign is like your campaign. I mean, this is a battle against the establishment and the entrenched powers. And the way you win this kind of campaign is the way you all have been winning. And I would suggest you've been winning. It's not over, and I know we can't take anything for granted, but to have stopped a corporation that is that wealthy and powerful with the backing of a government yourselves is just unbelievable. I mean, it's an amazing achievement, like I said, including for my son's generation and generations to come. So I'm gonna learn a lot from you all about how to campaign. And I think the key thing is, especially in a state like Rhode Island, it's grassroots. It's what you said. It's talking to people and hoping that they tell their friends and they tell their friends. And in a state like Rhode Island, we can do it that way. So I appreciate that. I really do. Boss.
Bob Woods. Bob Woods. That's you,
Well,
There you go.
one of the most difficult things being here tonight is not having to convince you. Most of the meetings that we go to, we try to convince everybody that we're right. And so, there's so many aspects of this power plant, with the water, with the environment, with the wildlife, endangered species, and on and on and on. But really, the problem starts with the systemic problem with the political government that we have. The other night, I just happened, nothing to do. I'm reading the Constitution of Rhode Island.
You really have nothing to do.
It was one of the most exciting things I've done in a while.
You don't have a TV.
But the truth is that the Constitution was written for our protection. It wasn't for the government's protection. The government is, should be enforcing the Constitution for our protection, not pandering to big corporations or to unions or anything of the like. And what's so difficult is that we're not experts in all these different fields, but what we are experts in is our environment, our families, our towns. And so, we gathered, together, and, you've given us so many compliments on how we manage that, but we need a champion. We need someone that can take what we've started, take our heart and our drive and bring it throughout the state. The system has to change. We talk about a lot of things broken in Rhode Island. That's where you start. That system has to change. There's no protection for us. The Constitution is just put aside, and while we're sleeping, trusting the process, there's resolutions and laws that are adopted not for our benefit at all, but to do us harm. And so we're fighting all that now. And I'm just relieved. I'm emboldened because of you're taking a stand with us. And I just want to say thank you very much.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Bob, I think you nailed it, is that the underlying all of this is a political system that's broken. And it's broken by having too much money in it. It's broken by the corporate influence. It's broken by upside-down priorities. It's broken by some wrong ideas about how to do things. And somehow has become disconnected from what you just said. You put it beautifully. You are experts, we're all experts in our own families, our own environment, our own communities, but our government has become very detached and distant from that. And I think it's all, I think it's really, in this case, just absolutely backwards. I mean, the purpose of government, as you outline in the Constitution, ought to be fighting this power plant, not opening the doors to it, given all of the problems that are just factual about what it would do and the harm it would cause to people and to the economy. I mean, they talk about 300 jobs. We're talking about 10,000 jobs if we go this other direction of clean energy. So there's no economic argument for it that adds up. And obviously the environmental and health harms and the water problems, I mean, it's just, the list is so long. It's not a close call. That's why I say of all the crazy backward things going on in this state, this is at the top of the list.
It is.
So.
All right, John Gonzalez, who's next?
Okay, many blessings, Matt. And first I would like to say thank you for your presence on Earth Day over in the Port of Providence, coming out to support our family at No LNG and PVD. I think it's important to acknowledge our Black, Brown, and Indigenous family who at this point really are the most vulnerable over there. In the Port of Providence it's been a heavily polluted, industrialized area for a couple hundred years now, since the Brown brothers built their first slave ships.
Different Brown family, by the way.
Thanks for correcting the record on that one. Yeah, I think there's some irony that you mentioned North Dakota. I spent 3 months in North Dakota during the Standing Rock occupation. And I was there during a time when there were egregious human rights violations against water protectors. As the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe, we're trying to protect their water out there. But I'm back on the East Coast, and my message is that Standing Rock is everywhere. I love all of these guys here, all my Burrillville family. They've been fighting hard for years. I'm proud of them. I've learned a lot from them. And, the message is resonating, not only here, but in cities and towns all across the state, and neighboring states as well, that are going to be most heavily impacted. Rhode Island, we have the worst gas infrastructure in the country, dating back to the Civil War. So the plan, obviously, as they moved away from that Brayton Point coal-fired plant, they closed that down. But they have 300 power plants earmarked coast to coast. So the plan is to, move from coal and oil to, quote unquote natural gas, which they're promoting as a bridge fuel. And of course, sure, maybe it's a bridge fuel, but for us, we know it to be a bridge to disaster. So I'm excited. I'm excited to hear more about your positions and what it is you're contributing. I know we're all looking for somebody to step up to the plate in a good way. We're not looking for a politician that will champion himself to be an environmentalist, but yet, not step up to the plate for the most vulnerable among us. Virtually all politicians in this state are in opposition to the offshore drilling. But it's a steep hill with respect to these land-based fossil fuel infrastructure projects that we have going on. So it wasn't a question, but it's an acknowledgement, and I thank you for your presence.
So thank you very much for the work that you've done. It's terrific. I think the point, even though it wasn't a question, I'm going to answer it. I'm going to say something. The underlying point I think you were making about the connections between all of these causes, I think, is critical, because I think that the only way to have enough power to fight the corporate power and the government power that has backed it for so long is solidarity among people, regular people who are affected. And you all have built that. I mean, that's one of the things I've been so impressed with. I'm an organizer by background. I helped to start City Year in Rhode Island 25 years ago, which is an organization that gets young people, ages 17 to 24, to do a year of full-time community service, tutoring kids in schools, running after-school programs, doing environmental work, all kinds of service to improve communities, and they get a scholarship for college at the end of that. And that work, that's been going here now for 25 years since I helped to start it, and is now in 28 cities across the country, in Europe and Africa. So it really has made a big difference. And what I learned from all those years of doing work in communities is how the most important thing is to bring people together. And the hardest thing is to bring people together and bring a big group together and hold them together, because people have different interests and different issues, and I'm sure there have been some disagreements among all of you, and somehow you have held everybody together and been rowing in the same direction for almost 3 years, and that is where all your power comes from. Now, if you can expand that to this larger cause, it would even be that much more powerful, and I know you've done some of that around the state. So I think the key idea underlying that is, I think for a long time, we, people, have been dividing ourselves in so many ways, divided by race, religion, politics, money, every way we can find. We've been cutting ourselves up and dividing ourselves and become increasingly polarized. And we see that certainly in Washington, right? Probably at the most extreme. But the fact is, our interests, our human interests, the quality of our communities, the safety, the health, the future for our children, we have those interests in common. We share those interests. And not only that, we are all connected. We now have all kinds of science and DNA studies and genetic studies that show us that we actually all started out together. Way back when. We were all literally a family of human beings. And so when I think about bringing people together, I don't think about it as just unity. I think about it as reunion, because we started out together, and somewhere along the way we lost the way and have become too divided. And so the more we can reconnect with each other based on our common interests, but also our common humanity, that's where the power is. That's where the power is in democracy. That's where the power is in fighting this fight. That's where the power is in standing up to a political system that isn't looking out for people.
Fantastic. Thank you. We have Denise, followed by Betty.
That'd be
Oh,
me.
there you go. You need a mic?
No, I don't. But I will for them anyway. Kind of along that note, that everybody knows everybody, pretty much. We have certain groups that have rolled out those yellow signs, and yes, they've made it around the state, but they disappear over the winter. We have groups that do websites and Facebook pages. We have groups that do bake sales and bus ads, in case you didn't see the Rip the Bus ads. We have all kinds of different factions that kind of specialize in things. But what we all do together in the morning is we get up and we read the paper, and we look for those nasty editorials, or the good ones, and we always look at the bottom for the comments.
Where are the good ones?
Oh, yours.
Okay, I got it, yeah.
So, and there actually are good ones, and we've done our own letter writing and rarely get published, but it does happen. But what we all do is go to the bottom, we look at the comments, and here we go. Who's at the bottom that we look for? Who makes the comments, everybody? William F. Horan. Some crazy guy down in Barrington? Tiverton. Former electrical engineer, I think he worked for, I forget, Raytheon. He has the most nasty electronic kind of focused responses that go on, calls us woodchucks and all this stuff. But he does focus on all kinds of old school electrical production stuff, and how wind, solar, when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine and all those things. And one of his favorite things to pick on is Deepwater Wind and how expensive it is. So I know you've addressed this with me. I'd like you to kind of, because you're going to need to do that a lot more.
Yeah, excellent. So Deepwater Wind. So, it was a mixed story because environmentalists were excited that there were offshore wind going up. But if you look under the hood of that deal, again, we get back to the corporate power problem. If you look under the hood of that deal, Deepwater is owned by a $32 billion French hedge fund. And the deal that Deepwater locked in with the ratepayers in Rhode Island was so outrageously, the rates were so outrageously high for the life of the wind farm, 20 years, that company and their hedge fund backers are going to make $900 million in profit off of the ratepayers of Rhode Island, which is outrageous. And it's outrageous our government let that happen to the people of this state. And so that's, honestly, that was part of the thinking of, wow, if this, the world is moving to wind and solar and renewable energy. That's going to happen. And do we really want the corporations and the banks to take and own all of it forever? This is our chance for some economic fairness here. Because like I said before, these are natural resources, and the wind doesn't belong to a company, and it doesn't belong to a bank. Now, they should get their share of the profits if they go out and do some work and build a wind farm, but not all of it. It doesn't belong to them. So that's where I get this idea of, no. This has got to be for the benefit of the people, for once, not for the benefit of a corporation. And so let's build it in a way like they do in Alaska, but not with oil. Let's do it with wind, where the people get a share of the profits. Everybody gets a check every year. There's no reason we can't do that. They're doing it in Alaska. They're doing it, by the way, in other places too. Hey, Jason. Welcome. So there's no reason we can't do it other than the fact that that's not how we've done it before. But if that's our thinking, that we're going to keep doing the same things over and over and over, you guys know the saying, and expect a different outcome, that's the definition of insanity, right? So unless we start doing some things truly differently, like what I've proposed here, instead of the ratepayers getting taken over the coals by a corporation for a wind farm, let's have the ratepayers, let's do the opposite. Let's have the ratepayers actually get a little profit because they live in Rhode Island and they ought to share in the profits of that. So unless we start doing things really differently, like taking our money out of the Wall Street banks and putting it in our own bank to invest locally, things are not going to change. And I can tell you, we've all been around for some period of time, and we've seen what's gone on, not just for the past months or the past years, but for decades. Nothing has really changed, I gotta say. There are little shifts to the left and shifts to the right, but the fundamental system just keeps, in my view, keeps shifting power away from people and communities to corporations and banks and the very wealthy. And unless we get at the roots of that and really change the way the economy works, then that's just going to keep happening. So we need some new ideas, and that's what we're talking about here. And I don't want to see another deal. I don't, as much as I want to see wind energy, and we can see wind energy, I don't want to see it done in a way that raises the rates for payers like Deepwater did, that hits the middle class people in this state again. We got to do it differently. Thanks for the question.
All right, it's Betty. Betty's next, and then it's Alicia Kelly after Betty.
Hi, I'm so glad that you're here and that you're with us against the power plant, because that really means so much to us. Because it's finally good to really have somebody on our side that's knowledgeable, and so we're really grateful for that. And, you know, just like Denise said, you know, everything that you see in the paper or you see on the internet, it's all of this, the same mentality. We need the plant, the bridge fuel, all of that. There needs to be so much more in the newspaper and on the news so that everybody in the state can know what's going on, because so many people in the rest of the state don't know. And as much as we yell and holler, it doesn't make it to the newspaper, our letters don't go anywhere, and that message just doesn't come out, so the rest of the people in the state don't hear that. So we need, like you, running for office to ring that message loud and clear whenever you can on the news, or to try to get it in the Providence Journal, because that's the newspaper that most people would read in the state, and really try to get that message in a way that we can't, because we don't seem to be important enough in that respect. Anyway, the other thing I wanted to ask you two questions. One is, what other environmental concerns that you might have in the state of Rhode Island that you really want to focus on, or really want to, you know, work at if you were elected governor? And the other question is, how important do you think the power plant will be as an issue statewide in your fight against Gina?
Thank you very much. Well, you know, the two things, you know, I think we need to do two things on the environmental question that are most important. I think one is we need to stop building fossil fuel infrastructure. We need to stop this plant. We need to stop the LNG expansion. That is the past. It is harmful. It is polluting. No matter what the other side puts out, that's the fact. We know that these are facts. They're not debatable. And so they both need to be stopped. And we're in a fork in the road. And so we also need to show the right direction, and that's clean energy. And so, you know, we actually put up a bunch of stuff on the website today, at my website, which is mattbrownforgovernor.com, you know, outlining this choice. In fact, I think the first policy piece we have up is about this issue, including about the plant, but also about going in the direction of clean energy and what's that going to take. And so, look, and it's not just, you know, this came up before talking about solar. It's, you know, it's not just the climate change issue. Climate change is critically important, but it's also the destruction of the natural environment. And so, you know, there's 5% of the original North American forest is left. I mean, that's partly why when we talk about clear cutting 100 acres of this forest, I mean, I think it affects all of us at a human level. This is wrong. This is not okay. These are our forests. This is our water. These are our oceans. And at some level, we just know this is wrong, and it needs to be stopped. So the climate and the carbon emissions is one issue, but it's also protecting the natural environment beyond that. And we need to do both of those things at once, which is why when you get to the solar question, we need to be looking at rooftops, we need to be looking at brownfields, and we need to have a comprehensive plan. So we don't, you know, take from Peter and give to Paul. So I think, you know, but those are, I think, the top priorities. So for example, on the carbon emissions reductions issue for the climate, right now the state's goal is to be at 38% renewable energy by 2035. I think this is really makes no sense to me. I mean, that's like saying, we're going to have a mission of sending a man 38% of the way to the moon. You know, like, we just have to do this. We're not talking 2 or 3 years. We're talking about 15 plus years from now. This is America. We can't build an energy system in 15 years. We mobilized this whole country to fight Hitler in 2. And we can't build some windmills and put up some solar panels in 15 years? So I don't know. It's completely it's completely backward thinking in my view. And so that's, I think that's the number one priority. But all this has to go together. You know, if this plant gets built, we will never get to those goals. Not even the 38% goal. You can forget about that. And the environmental harm, as we talked about today, will be generations to recover from. So we've got to do both. We've got to stop the bad and we've got to do the good when it comes to the environment. In terms of how much of an issue this is going to be in the race, it's going to be as much of an issue as I can make it, honestly, because the status quo is, government back in the plant and things going forward. So we have to make it an issue. We've got to make it as big an issue as we can, not just here, but all across the state and even in the region. And people have to wake up. Look at what happened at Standing Rock. That's people power. So, and you can never quit. Boy, that's the other thing you learn. You saw that at Standing Rock. You think you've won and they come back, and I know that's happened here. You think it's over. You think ISO New England comes out and says, "Oh no, actually we don't need the power." Well, isn't this over then? But they keep coming. They keep coming. It's a machine on a treadmill that just that just keeps going. And so you can never, we've all talked about this, you can never take it for granted. So you got to build the fight as fast and as hard and as big as you can. And I'm going to do whatever I can to help.
We have Alicia Kelly, and then it's going to be Steve Allen. Is that the?
Allen, right there.
Can everyone hear me up there?
Yeah.
And so back here? Okay, cool. So we're hearing a lot of things about the General Assembly. Last year, we had some allies in the GA. We didn't have some other allies. We won some, we lost some. And you, as being one of the three branches of our government, how do you plan on working with the other two branches to get what you want? Like, are you going to give them marching orders, or how do you plan on building the rapport with the GA to succeed?
Well, I think rapport is important, and I've spent most of my working life bringing people together to do hard things. So starting City Year was bringing people together to solve problems in our communities. I was Secretary of State, and we worked hard to crack down on the lobbying that was happening, the corporate lobbying that wasn't even being reported, so that deals were being made the public didn't even know about. We went after that and shut it down. And then after I left the Secretary of State's office, I brought people together across national borders, countries in conflict, to work together to reduce the threat of nuclear weapons and to reduce the number of nuclear weapons. And I've been doing that for 11 years. And that was United States, Russia, India, Pakistan, some pretty tough groups to bring together. And so I think, working with people is critically important. But honestly, more important than that is winning elections. It's democracy. And we've got to elect people who, as that's what you're doing here. As you said, you're interviewing people here. We've got to elect people who understand these issues and who are on the right side of these issues. And that is the most important thing. That's where the power is. And I'll do the best I can to work with the people we've got. But honestly, if we've got people who are just on the wrong side of these critical issues, I'll work to find new people to run against them and win until we can get things done up there. Thank you.
Steve, please.
So, my father was run out of town in North Dakota in McCarthy era, but I forgive you for that.
Here, you want this?
Yep. I wanted to know how you feel about cap and trade, and what you would do to keep large money out of this election.
I think cap and trade isn't good enough. I think I think it's, like I said, when Nazi Germany was conducting the blitzkrieg of the United Kingdom and London, we weren't talking about half measures. We were mobilizing to solve the problem. And when we mobilize, we can do exceptional things. On the climate issue, on the carbon issue, on the fracked gas issue, we are on a clock here. You all know that, in the world. And we ain't winning right now. And we need to be mobilizing to stop this as quickly and as aggressively as possible, and that's not cap and trade. The way I put it is, regulation has a role, but if all we do is keep regulating this, we're going to regulate ourselves to death, because it's not going to work. If you look at the Paris Climate Accords, Okay? Even if every country in the world keeps their pledges, we're going to lose this battle, and they're not close to keeping them. So that's when I look at like having a state like Rhode Island, a small state with all this wind, and our goal is to have 38% renewable in 15 plus years. That doesn't make any sense. Our goal needs to be 100%, and we need to do it in two simple ways. Not cap and trade. Stop building fossil fuel plants. Stop burning fossil fuels, and as quickly as we can, build a clean energy system. And if we're serious about it, again, this is America. If we're serious about it, we can do this. We have to decide to do it. But it is not going to happen as long as corporations have the influence they do in our government, because they're the ones who are making the money. And for some reason, they don't seem to care that they are also, and their kids and their grandkids are going to pay the price 30, 40, 50, 60 years from now. Why they don't care, why they think so short term, I have no idea. But we got to stop it. And we're not going to stop it fast enough with cap and trade. Yeah, short-term profit over the interests of the people. And it is not going to be solved by half measures. It's going to be solved by saying, leave the oil in the ground. Leave the gas in the ground. Let's get the wind, let's get the solar, and let's get moving as quickly as we can. So, as I said, this is not a fight just for Rhode Island, not just for Burrillville. This is a fight that is part of what's going on in the country and in the world. And you all are leaders of it, and we've got to win somehow. I don't know if people know Bill McKibben from 350, the environmental organization. He says about the half measures, when political people pat themselves in the back for getting some half measures done. He says sometimes, and in the case of the climate issue, winning slowly is exactly the same as losing. And that's the case here. We can't win with slow half measures. We got to be bold. We got to have a plan. And that's what we've been talking about tonight, and we got to get the political support to do it.
It's all coming.
We have 3 signed up speakers left, but after that, I'd love to open it to anybody. And in order I have them as Lionel. I'm sorry, I didn't get a last name. Is there a Lionel here?
I just signed it, not the speech.
Oh, not, okay, you got it. So we have Cheryl Murphy, then Taylor Bedessa.
I'm all set.
And Cheryl Murphy's all set. All right, Taylor.
Taylor, you're up. Can you hear me? Everybody hear me?
Yeah.
My question to you is, we've been at it for a while, as you know. I know you've held the state office before, so as the head of state, right, like we know it's easy to roll out the red carpet, to welcome the corporation, to say we're going to do everything in our power to make this corporation successful, to then, years later, make a statement saying I regret putting my thumb on the scale. Like, that's all easy to do. I guess how I want to frame it is, as a head of state, instead of inviting these corporations into the state, in expanding fossil fuel, what do you see the role of the head of state for preventing the expansion of these things? Because you can throw up as many wind turbines as you want, but if this plant gets sited, all you're doing is blowing around all these emissions. So my question is, as head of state, how do you prevent this from happening as opposed to expanding it? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'd say, yeah, I don't know, the way that politicians pick and choose what they can weigh in on, I never quite understand. Why it's okay to weigh in on offshore drilling but not frack gas in the forest, I don't know. I don't see what the difference is. So, we got to question these things. So look, the role of government, as I've been trying to say, and the role of governor is to protect the people, period. There is no negotiation over that. That's the job. And this is bad for people. And all you would have to do to shut this down is just follow the facts. Just follow the facts. Bad for the forest, bad for the air, bad for the community, bad for the water. On what grounds can this be defended and supported by the government? It doesn't seem to me to be debatable. So as governor, you just say the truth and say this can't happen. This does not pass any environmental standards that are okay for the state. I'll tell you, not every corporation that that shows up at our door in Rhode Island knocking on the door to build a power plant gets a yes and gets an open door.
That's right.
You can say no. It's okay, you can say no. Even to a corporation, you can say no. That's your job sometimes. And even if you come under pressure, you can say no. And so, I'm here tonight as a citizen and as a candidate for governor saying to the Invenergy Corporation, no. And as governor, I will say no.
The only follow-up I have to that is, as I said, it's been years now, right? EFSB final hearings are about to commence. Regardless of who is the next governor, regardless of how this whole thing shakes out, the fact that the final hearings are about to commence, if there's a change in the head of state, how would the head of state weigh in on this issue after the election, considering all the testimonies, all the filings, the fact that final hearings are about to kick off?
Well, first of all, this is leadership. I mean, why did the government endorse them in the first place and say, we'll do everything we can to make sure you're successful? Is that part of the process? Was that in the regulations? Right? So this is leadership. That's one kind of leadership. You say, open the door. We're gonna do whatever we have to do to make sure you're successful. And my leadership will be to shut it down. And so, I know there's some bills in the General Assembly to reform the EFSB and get some local representation on board. I think that's a good idea. But you got to find a way. You've got to find a way. This is not the small stuff. This is not the small stuff to fool around with. I mean, for all the reasons we've talked about. This is what leadership is about. And we've got to find a way, as you guys have been working on, to shut it down.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to touch on what you just said about the EFSB. That's been our biggest problem right now and our biggest nightmare. And I don't know if anybody can hear me, but one of the things that we've been fighting is with the EFSB. And as you know, I think it was Jason, there was a commission to change that. And I guess I'm asking, you must agree with the makeup of the EFSB and how it's not working for us. And would you touch on that about that commission?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the lack of local representation, the fact that, look, the whole thing is upside down. Okay, this is your community. It's not Invenergy's community. They have endless money to hire lawyers and do studies and send lawyers and fight with you. You're given 2 minutes, right, each person to speak. Yeah. Is that right? Yes. Okay. So the whole thing is fixed. The whole process, as it often is for corporations and against people. And so the whole process needs to be, the role of the government needs to be, as I said, to protect the people. And so there's a whole slew of things that need to be done. But one way or another, you have to be represented fairly. The process has to be fair. And the plant can't be built because on the merits, it's so damaging and harmful. And that all of that evidence is out there. It's been out there for a long time. Mike? Oh, sorry. What's that?
That's our representation? Go ahead, Mike, please. No, please, everybody that signed up has spoken, so. Hey.
I'm just here for close. I'm not here for the entire, I'm not here for documentation purposes.
Keep our respect. Go ahead, Mike, please.
All right, thank you. My name is Mike Lemrow. Thanks for coming. I didn't originally sign up to ask a question, but you got me thinking a little bit. Talking about how the process is fixed, and you talked about how, we've all come together and we've done a great job of kind of pushing things along and kind of delaying things. But all we're trying to do is hold people accountable and making sure that they're doing the things they're supposed to be doing. So if there's something you can do, I have something very tactical that I'm looking for help with. So one of the things that we feel very strongly about is that there's been an oversight on the whole environmental impact. So there's been no environmental impact study performed on this site. There was 30 years ago when Ocean State Power was that project was being looked at, and the same site was found that it wasn't suitable. These hearings are about to start, and they still haven't done the environmental impact study. If there's any way through this campaign that you're able to raise that awareness and kind of push that issue, I think that's a very tactical thing that would be a huge help for us.
Right, that's right, yeah.
I agree. I mean, it's I think it's the largest forest in the state. I believe there are 14 endangered species in the forest. I mean, why there wouldn't be an environmental impact study it doesn't make a lot of sense. Yeah.
Is this supposed to be an environmental impact study done?
Well,
No, it's not required.
It should be, but it's not required.
Oh, it's not required, okay.
the other
Burrillville requested an environmental impact study from the EFSB, but it's not warranted, so they didn't bring it.
Then what I wonder, and I've said it at the last meeting, and I'm going to say it again, why were we hardworking, middle-class folks, when we put on a 15 by 15 edition, why were we obliged to do an EIS?
That's right, that's right.
Yep.
So can we do a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess I'm going to go way off the beaten path, but seeing Kathy made me think of it.
Need the mic.
Oh, sorry. Like I said, I'm going to go way off the power plant path. So since you're here, obviously talking about running as governor, being an IT person, I watched this whole UHIP debacle, and it makes me want to throw up, knowing that not only the obvious stuff of the people that are out there trying to deal with this, but I also have feelings for the people, the employees are trying to deal with this nightmare that's been thrust upon them, and a bunch of them, reshuffled around and not kept in their positions, and, so everything got kind of really, it was like a swirling toilet. So now, here we are, and I like to look at it as that fork in the road. A fork was chosen to install it and go live, or not to install it and wait, but they went down the live path. So now they are about 470,000 miles down that road, 400 and something million dollars into the game. As a tech person, I really can't see a way out of it. I don't know how they're going to fix this. What do you do when you walk in the door?
Thank you.
And I said, when?
I think he calls IT.
That's right. So yeah, there was, this didn't just happen. The federal government told our state that the system wasn't ready to go, and our state government launched it anyway. So this is what happens when you make these choices. And a lot of people have suffered, and that's not, even in the media coverage, it's all about numbers, and it's a lot of human beings who didn't get the help that they need from their government because of this mistake. And it's still going on, years later. And so, so the first thing you have to do, I've run organizations for 25 years. The first thing you have to do is get all of the affected people together. So the tech people, the people on the front line workers, not just the people up here, but the people who are dealing with the frustrated and the angry and the distressed people who haven't been getting their benefits, and those people in the community who depend on this system for their benefits and have been delayed or had all kinds of problems. You need to get them all together and understand what's going on, what's the impact, what can we do to solve this as quickly as possible. And you got to dig into that and figure it out. As you said, I can't do that till I get there. But that's how you have to begin, and you've got to understand it, and you've got to just as I keep saying, like same with the issue here at the power plant, you've got to be laser focused on the job, which is to protect people and to look out for people, and you got to do what you need to do to make that happen. I would say, on a related issue, our state government's given $350 million in giveaways to corporations, and has been cutting Medicaid, and it's hurting people. And it's hurting our hospitals, and hospitals have closed down, and other providers have closed down, and nursing homes are struggling. And, we're gonna lose our local healthcare system. I mean, a lot of the big hospitals are looking at closing or trying to sell themselves to out-of-state corporations. And because they're collapsing. In part because these Medicaid cuts, while meanwhile we're giving money to corporations that have more money than they know what to do with. So, I had, when my kids were born, we had a great long-time pediatrician's office where I'm from in Providence called Waterman Pediatrics. And they were based in a big old house on Waterman Avenue. And you'd go over there and you'd climb up the 3 flights of stairs. And the doctor's offices were just the little old bedrooms in the house that used to be bedrooms. And you'd go in there and they would take your little baby and lay him down and check him out. And now he's back there. He's not a little baby anymore. And it was great. And the care was great. And they were responsive. And it was this local pediatrician that had been there for generations. Well, they got bought by a big corporation. And fast forward a few years, we take our daughter in, she was having a stomach ache and a headache. And parents, when something's wrong and when something's nothing, And we knew something was wrong. And we took her in, they said, I don't think it's anything. Really? Yeah. Maybe the checkup was like maybe 4 minutes. Okay. Go away, not better, 10 days later, come back in. I don't think it's anything. This happened 3 times, and each visit was shorter and shorter because this is what happens if you sell your healthcare system to a big out-of-state corporation because your healthcare system is drastically underfunded. So this is the road our whole healthcare system is now looking at, our major hospitals. So, it's a matter of priorities and having the right priorities. And I'd say the same thing about our schools. Like I said, earlier on, it's crazy that in the United States of America we have school buildings that are literally collapsing. Who would have thought that? And so, meanwhile, we've been for decades steadily cutting taxes for the very wealthiest tier and for corporations, and not funding our schools to the point that they are literally falling apart. And forget about what's happening inside the buildings, where we got a lot of kids who aren't getting a good education. So this is about priorities, and it's about understanding that the role is to look out for people and to protect people.
I know Billy Lacey in the back wanted to say something. Go to Jason.
First, I'd like to know how you feel about the tolls. Second, about the legalization of the marijuana. And third, we all here have grandchildren, children, whatever. And I don't want to see anything happen to like your son's generation and our grandchildren. We need somebody to stop this now from all this fossil fuel. So we need a leader, and like someone asked, Betty asked, if you could get the other, towns, cities, everything in the state to help in this fight, because I don't want to see your child or my grandchildren suffer because of these big corporations and all the, as they say, all the greed, the money. Please help us.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Go from the last to the first. So I'm going to do whatever I can, and I'm not going to back down for any reason. I'm really with you 100% on stopping this plant. And like I said, not just after November as governor, but through the campaign. I want to use the campaign to raise this issue as much as I can. And so I'm going to do that. Any ideas you have, by the way, look at my campaign as a vehicle, as a way to help the cause and use it. I mean, call me and tell me what I can do and what's going on and what I can do to push what you all are doing and promote it. I think marijuana should be legalized. I think because I think it's led to a lot of problems in terms of a failed so-called war on drugs. And I think it'd be better off to be regulated and safe and legal. The tolls I got to look at. We're looking at we're going to be putting out a whole proposal on what I feel is fixing the taxation system. And I'll just do a quick thing on taxes, and we can talk about tolls maybe a little bit after. But so as I said, about 20 years ago, the state started to steadily cut taxes on the top tier, wealthiest people and on corporations. And that did not, that's what they used to call trickle-down economics. That was supposed to lead to growth for the middle class. And that didn't happen, right? Rhode Island has just continued to struggle. Trickle-down economics has never worked anywhere. It's just a wrong economic theory. So what happened instead is that cities and towns were forced to raise property taxes to make up the lost revenue. Who pays property taxes? The middle class. Property taxes hit the middle class harder. Wealthy people own homes, but they also own stocks and art and things overseas. For everyday ordinary people, their home is sometimes their only asset. And so to tax their only asset means that it hits the middle class harder. So that's what's happened over the last 20 or 25 years. It is not, this is what I keep trying to say. We didn't end up in this situation with the school buildings falling down, the hospitals closing, people being not able to afford their housing, on and on and on, by mistake. It's because of decisions made by government. And unless we change those decisions, things are not going to change. So that's what's happened with the tax system. And so anyway, we'll be putting out a whole, we got some things on our website, we're going to be putting out a whole proposal, but the whole structure's got to be changed so that we create an economy that is not just working for the top, wealthiest people, not just working for the corporations, the banks, but is working for everyone, and that is not what we are doing now.
No, just one last thing, though. If the marijuana was legalized through the state, like Massachusetts, Colorado, they use this money to pay taxes, fix things. Is that part of what you would use the money for, or how would you go about if it was legalized? How would you, set up your places where it's legal to buy the pot, and what would you do with the money?
Yeah, well, no, I mean, that's one of the benefits, obviously, is it's another source of revenue for the state, and it has been in some states. It hasn't been a huge source in a lot of cases, but it's some, and we need everything we can get. So then the question is, what do you do with it? And that comes back to the question of priorities. What do you do with the revenue? And I think, I'll just say right now, to be clear, in my view, the top priority with what we do with our taxpayer dollars is we've got to educate our kids, because education is everything. It's opportunity. It levels the playing field. I mean, everyone who gets an education can make a life for themselves. That's the way it was supposed to be in this country when we started the public schools, a long time ago. It's democracy. It's how we raise good citizens. It's through our school system. And right now, it is just not anywhere near what it needs to be. And it has been for a long time. I was working in the schools 25 years ago with City Year, and we were having the same conversations then that we are now. What crazy? Why can't we turn the corner on this? Again, this is the United States of America. Why are our kids not up to other countries in math and reading and all of these things? This was a country that, again, sent a man to the moon, saved the world in the 20th century more than once. The Marshall Plan. We used to do big things in this country. Look, and let's just talk about Rhode Island. Where did the Industrial Revolution start in North America? Down the river in Pawtucket. Samuel Slater. That's why Rhode Island had a booming economy for a century and a half, because we led. You can't make an economy by taking taxpayers' money and trying to get a couple of corporations to come here. You have to lead. You have to be in front in a big way. That's what happened with Samuel Slater, and we had a booming economy for a century and a half because of that leadership. We need to lead that way on clean energy, in my view, and we could have a booming economy again, not struggling and scraping and cutting, right? And not having school buildings fall apart and people getting kicked off of Medicaid and all these things that we're seeing. So, questions, yes, the marijuana could bring in some revenue, and questions, what do you do with the revenue? Don't give it to corporations. Educate our kids, right? Get people the health care they need. The way you build an economy is not to, throw money. Look, let me put it this way. What do the corporations always say, and the people who back these corporations and government? They always talk about the free market, right? Competition, free market, everybody's got to make their own way. Well, if these corporations need $20 million of taxpayers' money to come to Rhode Island, maybe that's not a viable business. Maybe they don't know how to run their business. it's corporate socialism. It's not a free market. It's taking taxpayers' money and giving it to corporations. So either they don't know how to run their business, because like I've never known a small business person who got that kind of handout. They work for their money, right? They earn it. They innovate. They stay late at night. They make good decisions. They don't go to government and say, give me a handout. That's just big corporations that get that, right? So either they need the money, in which case the CEO should probably be fired because the business is not being run properly if they need government money. Or secondly, what I think is more likely is they don't need the money at all and they're playing states for suckers off of each other, right? And so well, we got to give you 10 million or Massachusetts will give you 20. Go, because they're going to pull up stakes anyway eventually when they get a better deal. Invest in the small businesses who are part of these communities, who are working hard, who are growing, and that's where the jobs are anyway. So, sorry, long answer to say yes, some revenue, but we got to figure out what the right thing to do with it is.
Couple things. We do have pot downstairs.
So why have we been up here the whole time?
Jason Olkowski, and then Julia O'Rourke, please.
On that note about the pot, no, it's funny. I had my hand up to ask a question. I was going to ask you if you knew that you were standing in part of the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, and then you talked about the Industrial Revolution. So we have a mill. It was a Tinko mill, then later became the Levy mill, and the remnants of the waterfall that powered the mill are right over there. And so, you know, what's interesting for us here in these old mill villages is that we live with the memory of what Rhode Island used to be. And when we had that sort of greatness, right? When our industry powered the region. And so, you know, you've touched a little bit on, you know, what you would do to spur growth in the economy and spur investment in the economy. And, you know, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about that, because what's sad is that I think we've had a lack of leadership, and not just, you know, for 1 year or 2 years, but for many years. And what's happened is it's made our state a target for these large out-of-state corporations like this that would frankly, you know, we're in the position that this is sad. The best that we can do is to sell our forests, to burn fossil fuel. That's all we've got left in our state. How sad and embarrassing is that? That we find ourselves in that sort of position. You know, so as a father to 2 young girls, somebody that wants to believe in the state, wants to believe that we have a great future still in our state, you know, it saddens me when I see, frankly, a governor travel all over the country and still we have very little to show for it. So my family was up in Boston this weekend at the end of school vacation week, and there is business booming, investment booming all over the place, you know, all sorts of corporations of every shape and size and industry, you know, corporations that have, you know, are on the leading edge, digital disruption, classic companies, service companies, construction companies. When the economy is growing, it rises all boats and all ships, right? Instead of just a couple industries.
Right.
And so right now we find ourselves in the position where we're beholden to just a couple industries in our state. And that's how we found ourselves in the position that we're in, fighting things like a power plant with very few other projects going on. So, with that backdrop in mind, and as you stand in part of the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, what would you do to encourage the right kind of growth in our state, the right kind of out-of-state investment, because we do want out-of-state investment, we want the right kind. What would you do, and how would you bring those things together to give Rhode Island a better future?
Thank you. Great points. So I think your key point that we totally agree on is we just have to think much, much bigger. If we keep thinking this way, like this current system of let's take some taxpayer dollars and try to get a corporation to come, that's not an economy. That's not an economy at all. And that's not really different than what's been going on for a long time. And like I said, you know, where we were to where we've come, it sort of happened slowly, the manufacturing leaving, starting 70 years ago, happened so gradually, I'm not sure we even saw it coming. And now we've gotten used to a constant economic struggle. And it's an economic struggle at the state level, what you're talking about, like we just don't have a lot of industry. But of course, where does that hit? That hits in the household. And the economic struggle in the household is because we don't have a real economy, a booming and rich and robust and diverse economy. Jobs don't pay what they need to pay. So the economic fact that I think matters for people, where the rubber hits the road, is that over the last decades, and this gets worse and worse, the incomes that people make are not close to keeping up with the rising costs of the basic things that people need. Housing, healthcare, college, childcare, and that hurts. And so, but this has all happened slowly, so I think we have gradually lowered, or our expectations have been diminished, and we're just kind of shrinking down and saying, is this the best we can do? And I find around the state, I have to say, and I think this is maybe the biggest challenge we face. You don't have it here because you've gotten into a fight, thankfully. But there's a lot of apathy. There's a lot of sense of, wow, it's always been this way, and there's nothing we can do. And so the first thing we got to do is what you're talking about, is find a way to raise our sights again. And I think a good way to do that is what you just said. Look at our history. I mean, Rhode Island was the first colony to declare independence, May of 1776. Rhode Island is where the Industrial Revolution started, in North America. The economy boomed. I mean, I think I may have said earlier, but in 1940, there were 100,000 more people living in Providence than there are now. So it's a big fall off from what we were and who we were and what we were capable of to what we're seeing now with, as you said, clear cut of forests, sell a precious natural resource, pollute the state to try to get some money in the state. That's a downward spiral. So totally agree with your outlook on this and the analysis. So what do? I think we have to do it completely differently. So one thing, and I talked a little bit about this, I think earlier, maybe before you got here, but we've talked about it before. We need to lead economically, like we did with the Industrial Revolution, Samuel Slater. And the biggest economic opportunity in the world right now is the new energy economy. And so you can see, I mean, big corporations are coming from Europe, big banks are coming to do this stuff. They're not doing it for nothing. They're doing it because they know this is the big opportunity. Energy is always a huge part of the economy. And here we are, so lucky, because we've got the wind. We've got the wind off the coast, and we're not taking advantage of it. And pretty soon, by the way, if we don't move on this, we're going to be behind the curve. Massachusetts and New York have bids out for 4 gigawatts of wind. That's more energy total than we use in our state in a year. Where are they getting the wind? From right off our shore. So if we don't get moving, pretty soon we'll be importing wind power from our own wind. Right now, we spend $3.6 billion a year importing fossil fuels because we don't have our own renewable energy locally, which we could. So we need to lead on clean energy. It's a long way of saying, and that will be a booming industry for us if we can lead and get out front and be an exporter for years and years and years to come. Thousands of good jobs that cannot be outsourced because they're tied to the landscape. Secondly, I think we've got to shift this emphasis on big corporations to small business, because that's where a lot of the jobs are. They're not going to leave. They're part of our community. They care about our community, and they need help. And so one thing is I talked about the state bank idea, investing in small businesses and earning some profit to have a source of revenue to continue to reinvest in small businesses. And that's the Rhode Island culture. I mean, it is a small business culture. That's what we all love about it. It's a neighborhood culture. It's a small town culture. It's a community culture. It's a small business culture, and we need to invest in that. The other way we can invest in that is to do what other states have done, which is a graduated corporate tax rate. So the big corporations pay a little bit more, and small business, we could eliminate taxes for some of the smallest business. And imagine what that would do to grow the economy. So if we could make Rhode Island the leader in clean energy and the best place in the country to start a small business in terms of the tax structure and fees, that would be a big step. The third thing I'd say, and this is why cutting Medicaid is so backwards, the way it's been cut, is Rhode Island had for our size, a really strong healthcare industry. Brown University Medical School tied in with Lifespan. The Hasbro Children's Hospital was a leader in the country. That's all falling apart under our eyes as those hospitals become bankrupt. And as I said, some of them have closed and some others are looking to get bought by out-of-state corporations. And part of that is driven by cuts to Medicaid. So it's not just that hurts the recipients who depend on it, children, older people, disabled people, all kinds of people who need that help. It also is gutting our healthcare system, which was a big part of the economy here. And we're losing it. Our doctors, our healthcare rates are high. Talk about broken. Our healthcare premiums keep going up. Our doctors are the lowest paid doctors in the country. What does that mean? It means they're not coming here anymore. They're leaving. Pretty soon, to get specialized care, you're going to have to drive to Boston. That's bad for our health, and it's bad for our economy. So investing in the healthcare industry, so clean energy, healthcare industry, and small business, I think, is the future of the Rhode Island economy, and we're doing everything in the other direction now. We got to shift course.
I just wanted to make a quick comment. He mentioned something about apathy and other than us, because we're in this fight. And I just want to say I have a pretty good feeling that people are getting apathetic because we've been fighting this nearly 3 years, and you are the first candidate to say, I'm going to help you out. So you can't blame people for getting apathetic. This is grueling. And for it to take this long with the hearing, opening statements start tomorrow. And this is the first gentleman, I hate the word politician, but to say, hey, you know what, I hear you, and I swear that I won't forget you. So, yeah, you can't blame people for being tired, that's for sure. Julia, please, thank you.
No, thank you.
I have a few questions. I want to try to make it one big, long one. What is your stance on abortion? What is your stance on gun control, marriage, equality? What's your plan for the opiate crisis that we have in the state of Rhode Island? And are you being backed by any unions?
That wasn't one question at all. Just because you don't take a breath doesn't make it one question. All right, is that it?
That's for now, yes.
All right. And what was your name again?
What's that?
Julia. All right. Pro-choice, I think we need gun control. We need to not have military-style weapons in our communities. I think, by the way, we also need to hold the gun manufacturers accountable. So the gun companies is the only industry in the country it's got a federal law passed so that they are exempt from any liability. It's the only industry in the country. So that shouldn't be. Now, that's a federal issue, but that's something that I would try to change. There was something before the opioid. I'm for gay marriage. I think anybody should be able to marry who they love. Opioid crisis was the next one?
Yes.
Okay. So the opioid crisis, it comes back to the same thing we were talking about before, which is who has the power in society. So here's the thing about the opioid crisis, and I don't know why this story hasn't been told more, but the drug companies who produced the opioids, the painkillers, they knew those were addictive. They knew it from the very beginning, and they peddled them like drug dealers to hospitals and doctors and providers all around the country. And now a whole lot of Americans have died because of it, and now we have people who need a lot of treatment and care. And I don't understand why our government doesn't make those opioid companies pay for the care. This happens over and over and over. Why don't the fossil fuel companies pay to clean up Hurricane Harvey? because of the contribution of climate change to that. By the way, they're starting to get sued now, finally. Some California has sued them. New York's looking at suing them. It's the same as the cigarette companies. I mean, we see this story over and over and over in this country. So the cigarette companies finally got sued, but how many people died in the years before that? So with the opioid crisis here, this has just happened, and they need to be sued. Now, some Rhode Island cities have joined a national lawsuit against the opioid drug companies, but this needs to be this needs to be this needs to be discussed. This needs to be raised, and this needs to be changed because they need to be held accountable for the harm that they did. Was there another one?
It was the union one.
Yeah, you're backed by any unions.
We're just starting now. I announced today, so we'll be calling people and sitting down with people, and we'll let you know.
You had a question? Yeah, please. Your first name?
Thank you. I really appreciate big ideas, and I love the idea, especially for a statewide investment fund. I think that's terrific. It's innovative, it's clever. But I also saw an alert on my phone this morning saying that Leader Mattiello had a ruling against him from the Board of Elections today, over $72,000 for some creative campaign accounting that he engaged in with his PAC and his election fund. It's hard for me, as a young person in Rhode Island, to believe that big ideas are possible here, when at the same time there's such a statewide reputation for corruption at the highest levels. If we have big ideas, when you mentioned the statewide investment fund, I immediately turned to my friends and I said, that's going to end up as corrupt as the General Assembly, which enacts it into law. How can we have big ideas and see them through to big results if we have so much corruption in the middle?
Good question. Well, so first of all, there are models for how to do this bank. So there's the North Dakota model. It's worked great for 100 years. I've studied it very carefully. We actually have something like a bank in Rhode Island now called the Infrastructure Bank. It's not a real bank, it's a revolving fund, but they control a lot of money, and they've got an independent board, and it works well. So there are ways to do it, but you've got to be smart and thoughtful and serious about it. So this would be an independent bank run by financial managers, not overseen by politicians, with an independent board, regularly audited. So you just have to put those processes in place. But I mean, it's certainly safer than giving it to Wall Street. They're going to crash again. They always do every 10, 12, 15 years. And last time they crashed, Rhode Islanders lost a lot of money, and we had 12,800 people foreclosed from their homes. So, you know, I'd rather have it here, be able to invest it here, watch it like a hawk, and be able to grow the economy here in Rhode Island.
Would you hire Joe Mollicone to be part of this bank?
You want a muffin? No. Yes. Did I answer your question? Okay.
Matt, first time I've met you is tonight, and a lot of these other folks haven't met you neither, right? I'd like to give you some information on what we are up against here.
Yeah, take it.
These are some of the things that we've fought all these years, right? I would like you to know that there is 5,000 acres of preserved land in Burrillville alone. If you count in Massachusetts, that's, yeah. Anyway, if you count in Massachusetts and Connecticut forest, you're talking 7,000 of preserved land that they're not supposed to build anything on. This piece of parcel they're talking about is right in the center of it. And guess what? 3/4 of a mile is the Boy Scouts camp. Pulaski Park. George Washington Park. The hospital. Now, I don't know if you know about the hospital, because you're a young fella, but way back when I was a kid, that was a TB hospital. A TB hospital. And why? Because that was the cleanest air in Rhode Island. They get the water from Wallam Lake. We have 20 ponds around that area that they want to build this in. 20 ponds. The Boy Scouts, and I don't know why the Audubon Society, all these others, DEM, I mean, DEM is everywhere. I'm a builder for 50 years, and anytime I turned around, I had to fill out papers for them. This Invenergy hasn't done a darn thing, brought anything, and Coit in 2012 bought 189 acres of land from the Boy Scouts because they needed the money, and she asked you and I for the money, preserve that land, and she's got a letter that we read in most of these towns. Supposed to be preserved forever, and here they are, and she's on this board. For the life of me, I don't understand that. But I just wanted to give you some of them facts, and if you could give me your telephone number or your I would write all these things down just to give you that, so you have that for ammunition anywhere you go. That's one thing you can yell and scream about. 7,000 acres of preserved land, and they want to build that thing. That alone. The other thing is, I don't know if you know about that plant up there on Sherman Farm Road, but when they finally let them have that in 1988, they made them put in a water line, they made them put in an oil line. At the end of summer, the Blackstone River goes dry. Well, it don't go dry, but it goes down enough that they couldn't get enough water. So they bought a sand and gravel company out, cement company, right? Pirelli's on 102. They made a pond out of that. So they ran trucks in and out of there. When they need water for that plant, every 5 minutes, 2 dump trucks go in, 2 dump trucks come out. If you ever saw the road, it is sopping wet. They're lucky though, in the sense that when winter comes, the river comes back up and they don't have to pump that water in there. But can you imagine, we were just down at Fall River, because they're voting against it. That's the last place that they've got to get water outside of Johnson, and Johnson is still in Superior Court fighting them, right? And our lawyers are against them, right? We're pretty sure they're going to knock it down. We were there last night, and we're pretty sure they're going to knock that down. But can you imagine that if they said okay and ran water from all the way there, all the way up through town, through Providence, and all the way up to Wallem Lake Road? I mean, it's just common sense. There's just none available with anything like that. So, but I'm serious though. If you want any more information, you give me your address or your email. The reason why I don't do that, my wife does it. I'll have her, because she can write better than me also. But if you wanted some information like that, it's very important that you should know all these things, so that when you go places, you could spell them out to the people and let them really know it. All right? Thank you, and thank you.
You better hope he doesn't mind.
Thank you.
I said, this could be your competition one day.
No, absolutely. I'll give you my number and I want to get that. And you can send me a tweet about it.
Okay.
Yeah, I did. Bill and Bill too took me on a tour, and I saw some of that. We went through the forest, and my feeling was if everybody involved in the process, the political leaders, just came out and walked through the forest and saw where the Boy Scouts are, and saw the pond, saw the hockey pond, and all of this, it just, again, just as human beings, we how could you cut it down?
At one of the meetings, I invited the 2 people there, Coit and Corin.
And your
That I
caddy.
would drive them up there.
And your caddy.
Huh?
And your caddy.
Yeah, no, Lincoln. I told them I would, that they reneged on.
I didn't go in the caddy. All right.
Alicia Kelly, you had a...
Yeah, so you're a Democrat now as of today, which is what it is, but 40% of Rhode Islanders are unaffiliated voters. The Democratic Party does have an open primary, which is great, the Republicans do not, but how do you plan on getting the 40% of us to vote for you versus someone else, especially in that primary?
Yeah. So that's the question, right? So first of all, I was a Democratic Secretary of State. I've always voted in Democratic primaries, and so what I found is that I do have an independent streak for sure. I did even as a Democratic Secretary of State. So, I'm like I think a lot of Rhode Islanders, which is I would say I am a Democrat with an independent streak, and we have more unaffiliated Rhode Island voters than Democrats or Republicans, but most of those unaffiliated tend to vote, in the Democratic primary when they get into a primary. So I think there's 2 answers to that question. How do we win? I think one is to have real solutions to problems. I think part of the apathy, part of the anger, part of the frustration is that people know. We see this not just here, but around the country, by the way, that people know that the ideas and the solutions being put forward are not going to solve the problems. From any across the political spectrum. The problems are big and the ideas are small. That's not going to work, and that's been going on for a long time. So I'm putting forward big ideas and new ideas because I think the problems are big and we need some big and new solutions. So I'm going to talk about those ideas. I'm going to say what I believe. I'm not going to, as you probably gathered here, I'm not doing canned talking points. I'm not doing a script, which I think people have had enough of. Because look, if you have a script, it means you don't really know what you believe. Right? Because you just have to repeat what has been scripted for you. so I'm going to just talk, and we're going to have conversations like what we're doing now. And the last thing I'd say is that, going up against the kind of establishment, the entrenched powers and all of that, the corporate power, in a different state might be a bridge too far. But in Rhode Island, you can go out and talk to everybody because of the size and have conversations. And it's not just about, can you raise $5 or $6 or $7 million and try to buy support with ads on TV, 30-second ads. You can really go out and talk to people and listen to them and have a conversation. That's what we're going to do. That's what we're doing here. And so we're going to keep doing that all across the state.
Can I follow up?
Yeah.
Now that you are running under the Democratic ticket, you now have a superdelegate vote. Sheldon Whitehouse voted against Bernie Sanders, so did so many others who have that superdelegate vote. Would you follow your party's voters for superdelegate, or would you vote who you wish to be president in the primaries in the future?
Well, I don't think we should have superdelegates. And so I would see if I could eliminate that idea, because it's totally undemocratic. So people vote, and that's it. That should be it. What's that? There shouldn't be, there shouldn't be two tiers to democracy. There's just one person, one vote. So the idea that, what happened last time, the governor, the senators, all these people, they went and voted against the way the state voted in the presidential Democratic primary. And so, but to me, the issue isn't who do you vote for. The issue is there shouldn't be superdelegates. There should just be voters. And there also shouldn't be an electoral college. There should just be voters. So, look, America, when it started, just, the idea was democracy, but we haven't quite fully got there. And the biggest problem, sorry, I lost the train when we were talking about corporate money before. Yes, I'm sorry, I never got to that one. Yeah. The biggest problem in American democracy now is that corporations and people with a lot of wealth have a big voice in the process, and the voters' voice has gotten smaller and smaller because of that. And so, what we have now is, it's a quasi-democracy. The amount of money. The presidential campaigns now spend $1 billion on a campaign. Well, where are they getting most of that money? Some exceptions, like Bernie Sanders with the $27 donations, but they're getting that money from wealthy interests. There's actually a study done by Princeton that studied this whole process, and it found that at the level of the federal government, when the government is looking at an issue, it almost always sides with the wealthy interests, and that the vote up against the money has a minuscule effect. So it's just not democratic. So superdelegates, I think, are undemocratic, and I think the money in politics is undemocratic. So how do you get rid of it? I'll take the public match, because I think, which means, there's a state match for what you raise, which is a way of keeping some of the money out. But we need to go much further. If you look at the United Kingdom, they have very short campaigns, very small amount of money they're allowed to spend. It's completely different. It's not this campaigning for 2 years, spending $1 billion process. So we've just got a long way to go. We were again, talk about what we used to be. This is where modern democracy started. And look at us now, 20% of people turning out to vote, 30% of people turning out to vote, huge amounts of, money being spent by corporations for candidates. It's just not democratic. So we got a long way to go to make our democracy democratic.
Sweet deal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you debate Gina Raimondo? And why I asked this, with all the answers the questions that we gave you tonight, you answered them very well. You make her look very foolish.
Yeah, I'd love to debate. We'd love to see you debate.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's, Look, that's what it's about. I mean, my focus is on the problems and putting forward solutions to the problems. But we've got to have these debates. As I said at the beginning, I think a lot of things going on in the state are crazy, and we need to go do a 180 on a lot of these issues. And obviously, this is at the top of the list. I mean, it's like I said, building a fracked gas plant in 2018 in the middle of a forest just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So yeah, I'd be happy and eager to debate.
Well, that's my point of yelling at the camera. You're saying awesome stuff that would make her tremble.
I'm gonna ask.
She'll see it.
I gotta get you on mic.
What's that?
So I gotta get you on mic.
All right.
Chance.
So would you cancel snow if there's a cancel school if there's a chance of snow? Maybe tomorrow.
No, I wouldn't. Let me tell you.
And the entire state shut down, yeah.
I mean, honestly, as you know, I've got that little boy there. Thank you. That's and I have a daughter who's 12. And I honestly think, we're just, as a parent, okay, we had way too many snow days this year, okay? But in my day, you could trudge through that and go to school, So, what's that? Uphill, no coat. Both ways. Those were the old days. There was no downhill in the old days. What's that?
I said, I drive a school bus, so I have a different opinion on that.
All right, fair enough. No. And look, these, part of leadership, obviously, part of leadership is bringing people together, and part is making good decisions. And, it's part of what we've been talking about tonight is, a lot of it is knowing what to do. And so, yeah. Other questions?
Yeah, it's getting close to 8 o'clock. I think
you want to go downstairs.
I want to wrap this up a little bit. Tomorrow is the first day of the EFSB. Tomorrow is the first day of the EFSB hearings, for the final hearings for the power plant. And somebody correct me if I'm wrong, that there's a possibility that this would run all the way to August. Am I right about that? Halloween.
Yeah.
Which is, what's the date?
October 31st.
October, she knows that. It's Halloween.
I'm a witch.
So, to October 31st. So we're very close to election time at that point. I'm just concerned that, the decision on the power plant will happen before the election.
It's not going to.
No.
You don't think that'll happen?
It's going to take, 6 weeks? After the last hearing issue, yeah.
So tomorrow, Invenergy does their opening statements. There's going to be a lot of information for you there. If you could get a transcript of that or attend,
I'll be there.
Very helpful.
Thank you. Yeah. So we're going to track everything we can and also stay in touch with all of you. We'll track everything we can directly, but if there's anything we miss, let me know, or anything that comes up, let us know right away. But we're going to stay on top. Yeah, we're going to stay right on top of it. Yeah.
I just want to say thank you so much. This has been a long, hard battle, and it's a breath of fresh air to have somebody come out here that really gets it, that hears us, and sees what we're trying to do here. So thank